The marble floors of Sterling Industries echoed with the sharp click of expensive heels as Victoria Sterling paced the length of her corner office, her phone pressed against her ear. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, the city of Chicago sprawled beneath her like a kingdom she ruled with iron precision. But today, the most powerful woman in real estate development was facing a problem that money couldn't solve. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fourth nanny quit this morning, she said into the phone, her voice tight with frustration. That's 16 nannies in 6 months, Mother. 16. The baby won't stop crying for anyone except. She paused, her jaw clenching. Except her. On the other end of the line, Eleanor Sterling's voice crackled with disapproval. Victoria, you cannot seriously be considering bringing that girl back into our lives. She's a nobody. A university dropout who cleans offices for a living. The scandal alone would destroy everything we've built. Victoria stopped pacing and stared at her reflection in the window. At 34, she had everything she'd ever wanted except the one thing that seemed to matter most now: peace in her own home. Behind her, on the mahogany desk, a silver-framed photograph showed her holding a tiny baby with the brightest blue eyes she'd ever seen. Her son, Michael. The unexpected miracle that had turned her perfectly ordered world upside down. The story began 18 months ago when Victoria Sterling thought she had it all figured out. As the youngest CEO in Sterling Industries history, she had spent her entire adult life building an empire that would make her late father proud. The company specialized in luxury residential developments across the Midwest, and under Victoria's leadership, they had expanded into 3 new states. She worked 16-hour days, attended charity galas in designer gowns, and lived in a penthouse that had been featured in Architectural Digest twice. Romance had always been secondary to ambition. Victoria dated occasionally, usually other executives or business partners, but nothing ever lasted. She told herself she didn't have time for messy emotions or complicated relationships. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when she was building something that would last generations. That all changed when she met Dr. James Morrison at a fundraising dinner for Chicago Children's Hospital. He was brilliant, charming, and shared her drive for success. As the head of pediatric surgery at the city's most prestigious hospital, he understood the demands of a high-pressure career. Their relationship felt logical, practical, 2 successful people who could support each other's ambitions without getting in the way. They dated for 8 months before Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The news should have been devastating. She had always planned to have children much later in life, when her career was more stable. But when she told James, his reaction surprised her. He was thrilled, already making plans for their future together. They would get married, he said, have a beautiful wedding that would be the social event of the season. Their child would want for nothing. But as the months passed and Victoria's pregnancy progressed, she began to see a different side of James. He was controlling, critical of every decision she made regarding her health and the baby. He wanted her to step back from the company, to focus entirely on preparing for motherhood. When she refused, their arguments became more frequent and more bitter. The breaking point came during her 7th month of pregnancy. Victoria was working late in her office, reviewing contracts for a new development in Milwaukee, when James stormed in without knocking. His face was red with anger, his usually perfect hair disheveled. "This is insane, Victoria," he said, gesturing wildly at the papers scattered across her desk. "You're 7 months pregnant, and you're still working 12-hour days. Do you want to hurt the baby?" Victoria looked up from her laptop, exhaustion evident in her dark eyes. "I'm perfectly healthy, James. Dr. Martinez cleared me to work as long as I feel comfortable, and I feel fine." "Dr. Martinez doesn't know what she's talking about," James snapped. "I'm a doctor, Victoria. I know what's best for you and our child. This obsession with work has to stop." Something cold settled in Victoria's chest. "Our child? Since when do you get to make unilateral decisions about my pregnancy?" James sat down across from her, his expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap. But you have to understand. I love you, and I love this baby. I want what's best for our family. And what's best is for me to give up everything I've worked for. Not give up. Scale back, delegate. You have capable people working for you. Let them handle the day-to-day operations while you focus on being a mother." Victoria felt a familiar anger rising in her chest. It was the same anger she'd felt as a child when her father's business partners would pat her on the head and tell her she was pretty enough to marry well instead of taking over the family business. The same anger she'd felt in college when professors assumed she was studying business to find a husband, not to build an empire. "I didn't work 20-hour days and sacrifice my 20s to build this company just to hand it over because I'm having a baby," she said quietly. "You're being selfish," James replied, his voice rising again. "This isn't just about you anymore. You have responsibilities." "Yes, I do. To my company, to my employees, to the baby, and to myself. In that order." James stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "If that's really how you feel, then maybe we need to reconsider this whole thing." Victoria felt her heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I mean, maybe I was wrong about us. Maybe you're not ready to be a mother. Maybe you never will be." The words hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Victoria stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man she had thought she loved. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a wife who would fit neatly into his vision of the perfect family. He wanted someone who would abandon her dreams to support his. "Get out," she said quietly. "Victoria, I didn't mean. Get out of my office. Get out of my building. Get out of my life." James left that night and never came back. Victoria heard through mutual friends that he had taken a position at a hospital in Boston and was already dating someone new, a young nurse who thought he was wonderful for wanting to take care of her. Victoria gave birth to Michael on a snowy Tuesday morning in February. She had planned to have a natural birth, but complications arose and she ended up needing an emergency C-section. When she woke up in the recovery room, groggy from anesthesia, the first thing she saw was her mother's worried face hovering over her. "The baby," Victoria whispered, her throat dry and scratchy. "He's beautiful," Eleanor said, tears in her eyes. "Perfect and healthy. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and the biggest blue eyes I've ever seen." When the nurses brought Michael to her for the first time, Victoria felt something she had never experienced before, a love so intense and immediate that it took her breath away. He was tiny and perfect, with wispy dark hair and skin so soft it felt like silk. When he opened his eyes and looked at her, she felt her entire world shift on its axis. But as the days passed and Victoria tried to settle into life as a new mother, she realized that loving Michael wasn't enough. He cried constantly, deep, heart-wrenching sobs that seemed to go on for hours. The pediatrician assured her that he was healthy, that some babies were just more sensitive than others, but nothing Victoria tried seemed to help. She hired the best nannies money could buy, women with decades of experience, graduate degrees in child development, glowing references from other wealthy families. But Michael rejected them all. He would scream the moment they tried to hold him, his tiny face turning red with distress. The only time he was calm was when Victoria held him, but she couldn't hold him 24 hours a day. She had a company to run, meetings to attend, decisions to make. The situation became critical when Victoria had to travel to New York for an important board meeting. Sterling Industries was negotiating a merger with a European development firm, and Victoria's presence was crucial to closing the deal. She would be gone for 3 days, the longest she had ever been away from Michael. She hired a night nurse to work alongside the day nanny, installed cameras in every room of the nursery, and left detailed instructions for every possible scenario. But 2 hours after her plane took off, her phone was ringing with frantic calls. From home, Michael had been crying non-stop since Victoria left. The nannies had tried everything: feeding, changing, rocking, singing, walking him around the penthouse. Nothing worked. By the time Victoria landed in New York, both women were in tears and threatening to quit. Victoria spent the entire 3-day trip on the phone with various experts: pediatric specialists, sleep consultants, child psychologists. Everyone had theories but no solutions. Some suggested that Michael was experiencing separation anxiety, unusually severe for such a young baby. Others thought he might have an undiagnosed medical condition that was causing him discomfort. When Victoria finally returned to Chicago, she found Michael exhausted and hoarse from crying, the nannies at their wits' end. She scooped him up from his crib, and within minutes he was calm and peaceful, nestled against her chest as if nothing had happened. That was when Victoria knew she needed help, real help, not just another expensive nanny with impressive credentials. But finding the right person seemed impossible. Word had gotten out in Chicago's tight-knit community of wealthy families that working for Victoria Sterling was a nightmare assignment. The baby was difficult, the mother was demanding, and no one lasted more than a few weeks. Victoria's assistant, Margaret, had started keeping a spreadsheet of potential candidates, but the pool was shrinking rapidly. They had tried nannies from agencies, independent contractors, even a few recommendations from other families. Nothing worked. It was Margaret who first suggested looking beyond the traditional pool of professional nannies. "Maybe we need someone different," she said during one of their weekly strategy meetings. "Someone who isn't coming in with preconceived notions about how to handle difficult babies." Victoria was skeptical. "You want me to hire someone with no experience to take care of my son?" "Not no experience," Margaret clarified. "Just different experience. Maybe someone who has natural instincts with children, even if they don't have formal training." That conversation led Victoria to post a listing on the university job board at Northwestern, where she had gotten her MBA. She wasn't looking for someone with a degree in child development. She was looking for someone who genuinely loved children and needed flexible part-time work. The responses were disappointing. Most of the applicants were clearly just looking for easy money, with no real interest in childcare. But one email stood out from the rest. It was brief and simply written, with no fancy formatting or buzzwords. The applicant, Emma Rodriguez, was a 22-year-old junior studying social work. She had grown up in a large family, helping to care for younger siblings and cousins. She worked nights cleaning office buildings to pay for school, but she was looking for daytime work that would be more meaningful. What caught Victoria's attention wasn't Emma's resume. It was the genuine warmth in her writing. She didn't promise to optimize sleep schedules or implement developmental milestones. She simply said she loved children and understood that every baby was different, with their own unique needs and personality. Victoria almost deleted the email. Emma Rodriguez was exactly the kind of candidate her mother would disapprove of: young, inexperienced, from a working-class background. But something about the email nagged at her. Maybe it was the honesty, or maybe it was desperation, but Victoria found herself typing a response. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the university. Victoria arrived early, choosing a table in the back corner where they could talk privately. She was expecting someone who looked like a typical college student, maybe a little rough around the edges, probably intimidated by meeting with someone like Victoria Sterling. Emma Rodriguez was nothing like what Victoria had imagined. She was petite, with long dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and warm brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She was dressed simply but neatly in jeans and a blue sweater that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. When she smiled, her whole face lit up, and Victoria found herself smiling back almost involuntarily. "Miss Sterling," Emma said, extending her hand, "thank you so much for meeting with me. I know you must be incredibly busy." Victoria shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of Emma's grip. "Please call me Victoria, and thank you for coming. I have to admit, your email intrigued me." They talked for over an hour. Emma told Victoria about growing up as the oldest of 5 children, how she had been helping to care for babies since she was 12 years old. She talked about her studies in social work, her dream of eventually working with foster children and families in crisis. She was articulate and thoughtful, but there was also something genuine and unpretentious about her that Victoria found refreshing. When Victoria mentioned Michael's difficulties with other caregivers, Emma didn't offer immediate solutions or dismiss the problem as simple colic. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions. How long had this been going on? What had the pediatrician said? Had they tried different approaches to soothing him? "Some babies are just more sensitive to change," Emma said finally. "They can pick up on stress and anxiety from the adults around them. If he's had a lot of different caregivers coming and going, he might be feeling insecure." Victoria felt a pang of guilt. She knew that her own stress and frustration had been building with each failed nanny, and it was possible that Michael was picking up on those emotions. "I'm not saying I have all the answers," Emma continued. "Every baby is different, and I'd need to spend time with Michael to understand what he needs. But I do know that patience and consistency are usually the most important things." By the end of the conversation, Victoria had made up her mind. Emma Rodriguez might not have the credentials of the other nannies she had hired, but she had something more valuable: genuine compassion and a willingness to see Michael as an individual rather than a problem to be solved. "I'd like to offer you a trial period," Victoria said. "1 week to see how you and Michael get along. The pay is $15 an hour, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day." Emma's eyes widened. "That's very generous. Are you sure?" Victoria almost laughed. $15 an hour was a fraction of what she had been paying the professional nannies, but to Emma, it was probably more money than she had ever earned. "I'm sure," Victoria said. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow, if that works for you." They shook hands again, and Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. The next morning, Emma arrived at Victoria's penthouse promptly at 8 o'clock. She had taken the L train from her small apartment near the university, then walked 6 blocks to the luxury high-rise where Victoria lived. The doorman had called up to announce her arrival, and Victoria met her at the elevator. "Good morning," Emma said, slightly out of breath from the long walk. "I hope I'm not late." "You're right on time," Victoria replied, leading her into the penthouse. "Michael is in his nursery. He had a rough night, so he might be a little cranky this morning." The nursery was a masterpiece of interior design: soft gray walls with white trim, a custom-built crib made from sustainable bamboo, and a rocking chair that had cost more than Emma's monthly rent. But despite all the expensive furniture and carefully chosen decorations, the room felt tense and unhappy. Michael was lying in his crib, not crying but making soft, unhappy sounds. He was 6 months old now, with dark hair like his mother's and the bluest eyes Emma had ever seen. When he saw Victoria, he immediately reached for her, his tiny hands grasping at the air. "He always wants me to hold him," Victoria said, picking him up, "but I can't hold him all day. I have conference calls starting at 9. Emma watched as Victoria held Michael, noting the way his body relaxed against his mother's chest, the way his fussing stopped immediately. But she also noticed the tension in Victoria's shoulders, the way she held him like she was afraid she might break him. "May I try holding him?" Emma asked softly. Victoria hesitated for a moment, then carefully transferred Michael to Emma's arms. For a few seconds, he was quiet, looking up at Emma with curious blue eyes. Then, as if realizing she wasn't his mother, he began to cry. But Emma didn't panic or immediately try to hand him back. Instead, she sat down in the rocking chair and began to speak to him in a soft, soothing voice. "Hey there, Michael," she said, gently bouncing him in her arms. "I know you don't know me yet, but I'm Emma. I'm here to be your friend. I know you miss your mama, but she'll be back soon." Michael continued to cry, but Emma didn't give up. She stood and began to walk around the nursery, continuing to talk to him in the same calm, gentle voice. She pointed out the mobile hanging over his crib, the stuffed animals on the shelves, the framed pictures of him with Victoria. Slowly, gradually, Michael's crying began to subside. He was still fussy, but the desperate, heartbroken sobs had turned into more manageable whimpering. Emma continued to hold him, swaying gently back and forth, humming a soft melody under her breath. Victoria stood in the doorway, watching in amazement. It had taken Emma less than 10 minutes to accomplish what dozens of experienced nannies had failed to do: calm her son down without simply handing him back to her. "How did you do that?" Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma looked up, surprised to see tears in Victoria's eyes. "I didn't really do anything special. I just let him know I was here, that he was safe." Victoria felt something break open in her chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name. For the first time since Michael's birth, she felt like she might actually be able to make this work. She might be able to be both a mother and a CEO, to love her son and run her company. "I have to take this conference call," Victoria said, pulling out her phone as it began to ring. "Will you be okay with him?" Emma nodded, adjusting Michael in her arms as he settled more comfortably against her shoulder. "We'll be fine. Take your time." Victoria went to her home office and closed the door, but she found it almost impossible to concentrate on the call. Every few minutes, she expected to hear Michael's crying through the walls, expected Emma to knock on the door and admit defeat like all the others, but the penthouse remained quiet. When the call ended an hour later, Victoria crept back to the nursery, expecting to find Emma frazzled and Michael in tears. Instead, she found them sitting on the floor together, Michael propped up against pillows while Emma read to him from a board book. He was alert and engaged, reaching for the colorful pictures with chubby fingers. When he saw Victoria, he smiled. Actually smiled, and held out his arms to her. Victoria sank to the floor beside them, pulling Michael into her lap. He was relaxed and happy, more content than she had seen him in weeks. "What did you do?" she asked Emma. "How did you get him so calm?" Emma shrugged, looking almost embarrassed by the attention. "I just spent time with him. Talked to him, showed him things around the room. He's really smart, you know. He notices everything." Victoria felt tears welling up in her eyes again. The other nannies all said he was difficult, that he had behavioral problems. "He's not difficult," Emma said firmly. "He's just sensitive. He needs to feel secure before he can relax. And he obviously loves you very much. He can probably sense when you're stressed about leaving him." For the first time since Michael's birth, Victoria felt like someone truly understood both her and her son. Emma didn't judge her for wanting to work, and she didn't treat Michael like a problem to be solved. She saw them both as people with complex needs and emotions. As the week progressed, the transformation in their household was remarkable. Michael still preferred Victoria, but he no longer screamed when she left the room. He began to accept Emma's care, even seeming to enjoy their time together. Emma had a gift for engaging him, she would sing silly songs, make funny faces, and talk to him like he was a real person with thoughts and opinions. But more importantly, Emma seemed to understand Victoria's needs as well. She never made Victoria feel guilty for working, never suggested that she should spend more time at home. Instead, she provided detailed updates about Michael's day, took pictures of his milestones, and made sure Victoria felt connected to her son even when she was in the office. By Friday, Victoria knew she had found something rare and precious, not just a nanny, but someone who genuinely cared about her family's well-being. When Emma prepared to leave that afternoon, Victoria made a decision that would change all. "There lives Emma," she said. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position. Full-time, with benefits and a significant raise." Emma's face lit up with surprise and gratitude. "Really? You want me to stay?" "I want you to stay," Victoria confirmed. "Michael needs you, and honestly, so do I." As Emma gathered her things and prepared to leave, Victoria felt a lightness in her chest that she hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since becoming a mother, she felt like she might actually be able to balance her responsibilities without sacrificing either her career or her relationship with her son. What Victoria didn't know was that this decision would set in motion a series of events that would test everything she thought she knew about family, love, and what it meant to be truly happy. The foundation of trust and affection that was building. Between her, Emma, and Michael would soon face challenges that none of them could have anticipated. But for now, in the golden afternoon light filtering through the nursery windows, Victoria allowed herself to feel hopeful. She had found someone who could help her navigate the complex world of motherhood without losing herself in the process. She had found Emma Rodriguez, and somehow, everything was going to be okay. 6 months had passed since Emma Rodriguez first walked into Victoria Sterling's penthouse, and the transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. The once tense atmosphere that had permeated the luxury apartment had given way to something warmer, more livable. The sound of Michael's laughter now echoed through the halls where his desperate cries had once reigned supreme. Emma had settled into a routine that felt as natural as breathing. She arrived each morning at 7:30, letting herself in with the key Victoria had given her after the first month. By the time Victoria emerged from her bedroom, dressed in one of her perfectly tailored business suits, Emma would have Michael fed, changed, and ready for the day. The baby who had once rejected every caregiver except his mother now reached eagerly for Emma's familiar face, babbling happily as she scooped him up for their morning dance around the living room. Victoria found herself looking forward to these morning moments more than she cared to admit. There was something magical about watching Emma with Michael, the way she could coax smiles and giggles from him with seemingly no effort at all. Emma had a gift for reading his moods, understanding what he needed before he even began to fuss. When he was tired, she would dim the lights and hum soft lullabies. When he was energetic, she would spread blankets on the floor and encourage him to practice rolling over and sitting up. When he was curious, she would carry him around the penthouse, naming objects and describing textures as he reached out to touch everything within his grasp. But it wasn't just Michael who had been transformed by Emma's presence. Victoria herself felt different, more relaxed in her own home. For the first time since becoming a mother, she could leave for work without guilt gnawing at her stomach. She knew Michael was in capable, loving hands, and that knowledge allowed her to focus fully on her responsibilities at Sterling Industries. The company was thriving under her continued leadership. The European merger had been successfully completed, opening new markets and opportunities for expansion. Victoria had been featured on the cover of Forbes, named one of Chicago's most influential business leaders, and invited to speak at conferences around the world. Her professional life had never been better, and she knew it was because she finally had peace at home. Emma, meanwhile, was discovering aspects of herself she had never known existed. Growing up in a cramped apartment with 4 younger siblings, She had always been practical about childcare, focused on meeting basic needs and maintaining order. But with Michael, she had the luxury of truly nurturing, of watching him develop, and celebrating each small milestone. She documented everything in a detailed journal that she shared with Victoria each evening, complete with photos and funny stories about Michael's daily adventures. The relationship between Victoria and Emma had evolved from employer and employee to something more complex and meaningful. They spent their evenings together in the penthouse, Emma staying late to help with Michael's bedtime routine. Victoria would order dinner from the city's finest restaurants, and they would eat together while Michael played on his blanket, occasionally crawling over to pull himself up on their legs and demand attention. These dinners had become the highlight of Victoria's day. Emma was intelligent and thoughtful, with perspectives on life that challenged Victoria's assumptions about the world. Emma spoke passionately about her social work studies, her desire to help families in crisis, her belief that every child deserved love and stability regardless of their circumstances. Victoria found herself sharing stories from her own childhood, the pressure she had felt to prove herself in a male-dominated industry, the loneliness that had driven her to work such long hours. One evening in late October, as autumn painted the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and crimson, Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. She had been offered an opportunity to speak at an international development conference in London, a prestigious invitation that would normally have been impossible to refuse. But the conference would require her to be away for 10 days, and the thought of leaving Michael for so long made her chest tighten with anxiety. "You should go," Emma said when Victoria mentioned the invitation. They were sitting in the living room after dinner, Michael asleep in his crib, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. "This sounds like an incredible opportunity." Victoria shook her head. 10 days is too long. Michael has never been away from me for more than a day or two. What if he regresses? What if he starts crying again like he used to? Emma set down her cup of tea and turned to face Victoria fully. "He won't regress. He's secure now, happy. He knows I'll take care of him, and he knows you'll come back. Besides, you've worked too hard to let fear hold you back from opportunities like this." "It's not just fear," Victoria said, though she knew Emma was partly right. "It's responsibility. I'm his mother. I can't just disappear for 10 days and expect someone else to fill that role." "You're not disappearing," Emma said. Gently, "You're providing for his future, building something that will benefit him for his entire life. And you're not asking someone else to fill your role. You're asking someone who loves him to help you care for him." The word love hung in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. Emma did love Michael, perhaps as much as Victoria herself did. It was evident in every gentle touch, every patient moment spent soothing his tears, every celebration of his small triumphs. Victoria felt a complex mixture of gratitude and something that might have been jealousy, though she pushed that thought away as unworthy. "What if something happens while I'm gone?" Victoria asked. "What if he gets sick or hurt, or—" "Then I'll handle it," Emma interrupted, her voice calm and confident. "I'll call his pediatrician, take him to the emergency room if necessary. Keep you informed every step of the way. Victoria, you have to trust that he'll be okay. More than that, you have to trust that you deserve to have a career and a life outside of this apartment." Victoria looked at Emma's earnest face, saw the sincerity in her warm brown eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. Emma wasn't just offering to babysit for 10 days. She was offering to be a true partner in raising Michael, to share the responsibility and the worry and the joy that came with loving him. "Okay," Victoria said quietly. "I'll accept the invitation." Emma's face broke into a radiant smile. "Really? You'll go?" "I'll go," Victoria confirmed, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. "But I want you to move in while I'm away. I don't want you commuting back and forth to your apartment every day. Stay here, use the guest room. Make yourself completely at home." Emma's eyes widened with surprise. "Are you sure? That's a lot to ask." "It's not asking," Victoria said firmly. "It's practical. Michael will be more comfortable with you here. Full time, and I'll worry less knowing you don't have to travel across the city twice a day." The 10 days of Victoria's absence passed more smoothly than either of them had dared to hope. Emma moved into the guest room with a single suitcase, bringing her textbooks and laptop so she could keep up with her coursework in the evenings after Michael was asleep. She established routines that were similar to, but subtly different from, Victoria's, adapting to Michael's needs while maintaining the security and consistency he craved. Victoria called twice a day, desperate for updates and reassurance. Emma was patient with her anxiety, sending photos and videos throughout the day, holding the phone so Victoria could see Michael's face during their conversations. Gradually, Victoria began to relax, to trust that her son was truly safe and happy in Emma's care. The conference was a tremendous success. Victoria delivered a keynote address that was met with standing ovation, participated in panel discussions with some of the most influential developers in the world, and established partnerships that would benefit Sterling Industries for years to come. But more importantly, she proved to herself that she could be an excellent mother and a successful businesswoman, that one role didn't have to diminish the other. When Victoria returned to Chicago, she found her penthouse filled with an atmosphere of contentment she had never experienced before. Michael had grown and changed in her absence, becoming more mobile and vocal, but he was still the happy, secure baby she had left behind. He greeted her return with squeals of delight, reaching for her with chubby arms, but he didn't cling desperately as she had feared he might. He was comfortable with both the women who loved him, secure in the knowledge that he was wanted and cherished. That night, after Michael was asleep and Emma had returned to her own apartment, Victoria sat alone in her living room and realized that something fundamental had changed. The penthouse felt empty without Emma's presence, too quiet and sterile. She found herself missing the sound of Emma's laughter, the sight of her curled up on the sofa with her textbooks, the comfortable conversations they shared over dinner. The feeling only intensified in the days that followed. Emma returned to her regular schedule, arriving each morning and leaving each evening. But Victoria found herself looking for excuses to extend their time together. She would suggest ordering dinner for 3, claiming she was too tired to eat alone. She would ask Emma's opinion on business decisions, valuing her thoughtful insights. She would linger in the nursery during Michael's bedtime routine, reluctant to end the peaceful domestic scene. Emma, for her part, seemed content with their arrangement, but occasionally Victoria caught glimpses of something deeper in her expression. When Victoria worked late and missed Michael's bedtime, Emma would look disappointed, though she never complained. When Victoria mentioned casual dates with business associates, Emma would grow quiet, though she always maintained her professional demeanor. The complexity of their relationship came to a head on a snowy evening in early December. Victoria had been invited to a charity gala, one of the season's most exclusive events, but her usual escort had canceled at the last minute due to a family emergency. She was debating whether to attend alone when Emma made an offhand comment that changed everything. "It seems lonely," Emma said, looking up from the financial magazine she was reading while Michael played on his blanket nearby. "All these fancy events you attend by yourself. Don't you ever want someone to share them with?" Victoria paused. In her review of Michael's daily schedule, struck by the wistfulness in Emma's voice. "I've never really thought about it," she said, though that wasn't entirely true. "My career has always come first. Relationships tend to complicate things." "But you're not just a career anymore," Emma said softly. "You're a mother, a person with a life outside the office. Don't you want someone to share that with?" Victoria looked at Emma, really looked at her, and felt something click into place. Emma wasn't just talking about relationships in general. She was talking about them about the connection that had been building between them for months. The realization should have been shocking, should have sent Victoria into a panic about professional boundaries and appropriate behavior. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Emma," Victoria said carefully, "are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Emma's cheeks flushed pink, but she didn't look away. "I'm suggesting that you deserve to be happy. Not just successful, not just a good mother, but genuinely happy. And I think you know what would make you happy, if you were brave enough to admit it." Victoria set down the papers she had been holding and moved to sit beside Emma on the sofa. Michael crawled over to them, pulling himself up on Victoria's legs and babbling happily, oblivious to the charged atmosphere around him. "This is complicated," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You work for me." "People would talk." "People always talk," Emma replied. "The question is whether you're going to let their opinions control your life." Victoria reached out and touched Emma's hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight tremor that revealed her nervousness. "I've never felt this way about another woman before." "I've never felt this way about anyone before," Emma admitted. "But watching you with Michael, seeing how much you love him, how hard you work to give him everything he needs while still being true to yourself, it made me realize what real strength looks like, what real love looks like." They sat in silence. For a moment, hands touching, Michael babbling contentedly between them. Victoria felt as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump into something unknown and potentially dangerous. But for the first time in her adult life, the risk felt worth taking. "Come with me," Victoria said suddenly. "To the gala tonight, as my date." Emma's eyes widened. "Victoria, are you sure? That's a very public way to make a statement." "I'm tired of hiding," Victoria said, surprised by her own boldness. "I'm tired of pretending that the most important things in my life are my career and my image. Michael is important. You're important. This, whatever this is between us, is important." Emma squeezed Victoria's hand. "What about your mother, your business associates, the media?" Victoria thought about Eleanor Sterling's reaction, about the potential gossip and speculation that would follow. Then she looked at Michael, happily playing with his toys, and at Emma, whose love and dedication had transformed their lives. The choice suddenly seemed simple. "Let them talk," Victoria said. "I've spent my entire life trying to meet other people's expectations. For once, I want to do something that makes me happy." That evening, Victoria and Emma attended the charity gala together. Victoria wore a stunning black dress that had been custom-made by a designer in Milan, while Emma looked radiant in a deep blue gown that Victoria had insisted on buying for her. They walked into the ballroom hand in hand, ignoring the surprised whispers and speculative glances from Chicago's social elite. The evening was magical in a way Victoria had never experienced at such events. Instead of networking and making small talk with business contacts, she spent the night dancing with Emma, laughing at her gentle teasing about Victoria's competitive bidding during the charity auction, sharing quiet moments on the terrace overlooking the city lights. When they returned to the penthouse that night, they found Michael sleeping peacefully in his crib, watched over by Mrs. Patterson, the older woman from the building who occasionally helped with babysitting. As they paid Mrs. Patterson and saw her out, Victoria felt a sense of completion she had never known was possible. "Thank you," she said to Emma as they stood in the living room, the city quiet around them. "For what?" "For tonight. For the past 6 months. For showing me that it's possible to have everything I want without sacrificing the things that matter most." Emma stepped closer, reaching up to touch Victoria's face gently. "You don't have to thank me for loving you. For loving both of you." Victoria leaned down and kissed her, soft and tentative at first, then with growing confidence as Emma responded. It felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. When they broke apart, Emma rested her. forehead against Victoria's. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure it out as we go," Victoria said. Together, the weeks that followed were a period of adjustment and discovery. Emma gradually began spending more nights at the penthouse, moving her belongings piece by piece until the guest room became unofficially hers. They navigated the complexities of their relationship carefully, maintaining professional boundaries during the day while exploring their personal connection in the evenings. Michael seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere around him, becoming even more content and secure than before. He had always been happy with both Victoria and Emma individually, but now he reveled in having both of them present simultaneously. His favorite game became crawling back and forth between them, squealing with delight as they passed him back and forth, showering him with kisses and praise. Victoria's professional life continued to flourish, but she found herself approaching it with a new perspective. Success was still important to her, but it was no longer the sole measure of her worth. She began delegating more responsibilities to her capable team, trusting them to handle day-to-day operations while she focused on high-level strategy and major decisions. This allowed her to spend more time at home, to be present for Michael's milestones, and to nurture her growing relationship with Emma. Emma, meanwhile, was thriving in her studies and her role as Michael's caregiver. She had found a way to balance her coursework with her responsibilities to the Sterling family, often studying while Michael napped or in the evenings after he was asleep. Victoria had offered to pay for her tuition, but Emma had politely declined, insisting on maintaining some financial independence even as their lives became increasingly intertwined. The first real test of their new relationship came during the holiday season. Victoria's mother, Eleanor Sterling, announced her intention to spend Christmas week in Chicago, staying in the penthouse as she always did. Victoria had been dreading this visit for weeks, knowing that Eleanor would have questions about Emma's increased presence in their lives. Eleanor Sterling was a formidable woman who had ruled Chicago society for decades. She had built her own successful career in philanthropy and nonprofit management, but she had always maintained very traditional views about family and relationships. She had been openly critical of Victoria's decision to have a child without being married, and Victoria knew she would be even less understanding about her daughter's relationship with another woman. The confrontation came on Eleanor's second evening in Chicago. She had been watching Emma's interactions with Michael throughout the day, noting the easy familiarity between them, the way Victoria's face softened whenever Emma entered the room. That evening, after Michael was asleep and Emma had retreated to her room to study, Eleanor cornered Victoria in the kitchen. "What exactly is going on here, Victoria?" Eleanor asked, her voice sharp with disapproval. "That girl is clearly more than just a nanny. Are you having some sort of inappropriate relationship with an employee?" Victoria felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety, the same feeling she had experienced as a child whenever her mother's disapproval focused on her. But then she thought about Emma, sleeping in the next room, about Michael, safe and loved in his crib, about the happiness she had found in creating this unconventional family. "Emma is not just an employee," Victoria said quietly. "She's the woman I love. She's Michael's second mother. She's part of our family." Eleanor's face went white with shock, then red with anger. "Have you lost your mind? You're jeopardizing everything, your reputation, your business, your son's future. For what? Some misguided experiment in playing house?" "I'm not playing house," Victoria said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm building a life. A real life, with people who love me for who I am, not for what I can do for them." "This is ridiculous," Eleanor snapped. "You're a public figure, Victoria. You have responsibilities to the company, to the family name. You can't just decide to live like some bohemian artist, ignoring the consequences of your choices." Victoria felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. "The way you ignored the consequences when you pressured Dad to work himself to death building this empire, The way you ignored the consequences when you taught me that success was more important than happiness. I won't make those mistakes with Michael." Eleanor stepped back as if she had been slapped. "Your father died happy, knowing he had built something lasting. Something that would provide for his family for generations. My father died alone in his office at midnight, surrounded by financial reports instead of the people who loved him." Victoria shot back. "I won't let that be my legacy. I won't let that be Michael's memory of his mother." The argument continued for another hour, voices raised and emotions running high. Emma emerged from her room once, drawn by the sound of shouting, but Victoria waved her away, not wanting her to witness the ugliness of the confrontation. Finally, Eleanor stormed off to her room, declaring that she would be returning to her own home the next morning, and that Victoria would regret this decision for the rest of her life. Victoria stood alone in the kitchen, shaking with adrenaline and emotion. She had stood up to her mother, defended her choices and her family, but the victory felt hollow. She loved Eleanor despite their differences, and the thought of losing her mother's support and approval was devastating. Emma found her there an hour later, sitting at the kitchen island with tears streaming down her face. Without a word, Emma wrapped her arms around Victoria, holding her close as she sobbed out her frustration and fear. "She's not wrong about everything," Victoria whispered against Emma's shoulder. "People will talk. There could be consequences for the business, for Michael's future. Do you regret it?" Emma asked softly. "Do you regret choosing this life?" Victoria pulled back, to look into Emma's eyes, seeing her own fears reflected there. "No," she said firmly, "I don't regret it. I regret that it has to be so complicated, but I don't regret loving you. I don't regret choosing happiness over approval." Emma kissed her forehead gently. "Then we'll figure out the rest, together." Eleanor left the next morning without saying goodbye, but she did leave a note for Victoria on the kitchen counter. It was brief and formal, expressing her disappointment and her hope that Victoria would come to her senses before it was too late. But at the bottom, in her mother's careful handwriting, were the words, "I love you, even when I don't understand you." Victoria carried that note with her for days, reading it whenever she felt doubt creeping in. It reminded her that love didn't always mean approval, that family could survive disagreement and disappointment. She hoped that eventually, Eleanor would come to understand and accept the choices Victoria had made. But even if she didn't, Victoria knew she had chosen correctly. As winter gave way to spring, Victoria and Emma's relationship deepened and solidified. They moved through their days with an easy rhythm, sharing responsibilities and joys, supporting each other through challenges and celebrations. Michael continued to thrive under their joint care, becoming a happy, curious toddler who brought laughter and wonder to their lives every day. Victoria had never imagined that happiness could be so simple, so domestic, so complete. She had spent years chasing external validation and professional achievements, only to discover that the most important successes were measured in quieter moments. Michael's first steps taken while holding both their hands. Lazy Sunday mornings, spent reading in bed while he napped between them. The way Emma's face lit up when Victoria walked through the door each evening. But even as their personal life flourished, Victoria remained unaware of the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The choices she had made, the life she had built, had not gone unnoticed by certain people in her professional and social circles. There were those who saw her happiness as a threat, her unconventional family as a weakness to be exploited. The reckoning was coming, though Victoria couldn't see it yet. For now, she was content to live in the bubble of domestic bliss she had created, surrounded by the two people who meant more to her than all the boardrooms and business deals in the world. She had found her family, chosen and built with intention and love, and she believed that nothing could shake the foundation they had created together. The truth was more complicated than Victoria realized, and the peace she had found was more fragile than she knew. But for these precious months, she allowed herself to believe in the fairy tale she had stumbled into, to trust that love really could conquer all, to hope that the happiness she had found was strong enough to withstand whatever challenges lay ahead. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in April when Victoria's assistant Margaret burst into her office without knocking, her face pale with panic. In her trembling hands, she held a printed email that would shatter the peaceful world Victoria had so carefully constructed. "Miss Sterling," Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this immediately." Victoria looked up from the architectural plans she had been reviewing for a new development project in Milwaukee. Margaret had worked for her for 7 years and had never once entered her office without permission, let alone in such a state of obvious distress. "What is it?" Victoria asked, setting down her pen and extending her hand for the document. The email was from Robert Chun, a rival developer who had been competing with Sterling Industries for contracts across the Midwest. The subject line: "Read, concerning information about your personal choices." Victoria's blood turned to ice as she read the message. "Victoria, I thought you should be aware that certain photographs and information about your living situation have come to my attention. While I have no personal interest in your private affairs, I felt obligated to inform you that others in our industry are discussing these matters. Perhaps we should arrange a meeting to discuss how we might handle this situation to everyone's benefit." Attached to the email were 3 photographs that made Victoria's stomach lurch. The first showed her and Emma entering the charity gala together, their clasped hands clearly visible. The second captured them sharing an intimate kiss on the penthouse balcony, taken with a telephoto lens from a building across the street. The third was the most damaging, Emma playing with Michael in the park, with a caption identifying her as the mysterious nanny who has captured the heart of Chicago's most powerful businesswoman. Victoria's hands shook as she set the papers down on her desk. Someone had been watching them, following them, documenting their private moments. The violation felt like ice water in her veins. How did he get these? Victoria asked, though she dreaded the answer. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. "I've been making some calls since the email arrived an hour ago. It seems there's been a private investigator following you for several weeks. Someone hired him to document your relationship." "Who?" Victoria's voice was sharp as a blade. "Who hired him?" "I don't know yet," Margaret admitted. "But Miss Sterling, there's more. I've received calls from 3 different news outlets this morning. They're asking for comments about your secret romance and whether it affects your ability to run the company. Someone is shopping this story around." Victoria felt the walls of her carefully constructed life beginning to crumble around her. She thought of Emma, probably at home with Michael at this very moment, blissfully unaware that their privacy had been invaded, their love turned into ammunition for someone else's agenda. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day," Victoria said, grabbing her jacket and purse. "I need to get home." The 20-minute drive to her penthouse felt like the longest journey of Victoria's life. Her mind raced through possibilities, trying to identify who might be behind this attack. Robert Chun was a likely suspect. He had been bitter about losing several major contracts to Sterling Industries over the past year. But it could be anyone in Chicago's cutthroat business community, anyone who saw her happiness as a weakness to exploit. When Victoria entered the penthouse, she found Emma and Michael in the living room, building an elaborate castle out of colorful blocks. Michael, now 15 months old, was walking confidently and chattering in his own language as he carefully placed each block where Emma instructed. The scene was so peaceful, so perfect, that Victoria felt her heart breaking at the thought of what she was about to shatter. "You're home early," Emma said, looking up with a smile that faded when she saw Victoria's expression. "What's wrong?" Victoria sat down heavily on the sofa, pulling out the printed email and photographs. "We have a problem. A big one." Emma's face went white as she looked through the documents. Michael, sensing the change in atmosphere, abandoned his blocks and crawled over to Victoria, pulling himself up on her legs and babbling for attention. Victoria picked him up automatically, holding him close as if she could protect him from what was coming. Who would do this? Emma asked, her voice barely audible. Why would someone want to hurt us? Because they think our relationship makes me vulnerable, Victoria said bitterly. Because they think they can use our love against me to get what they want. Emma set the papers aside and moved closer to Victoria and Michael. What do they want? Victoria looked at Robert Chun's email again, focusing on the phrase, to everyone's benefit. I think they want me to back down from competing for certain contracts. Or maybe they want inside information about our development plans. Or they could be trying to force me out of the company entirely. Can they do that? Emma asked. Can they actually force you out because of who you're in love with? Victoria considered the question carefully. Sterling Industries was technically a family company, but it had shareholders and a board of directors. If enough negative publicity surrounded Victoria's leadership, if her personal life became a distraction that affected the company's reputation and profits, there could be pressure for her to step down. They can try, Victoria said finally, and they might succeed if we don't handle this correctly. Emma was quiet for a long moment, watching Michael play with the buttons on Victoria's jacket. What do you want to do? I don't know, Victoria admitted. Part of me wants to fight, to refuse to let them use our love as a weapon. But another part of me thinks maybe we should be more discreet, pull back from public appearances together, make it harder for them to attack us. You mean go back into hiding, Emma said softly. I mean protect what we have, Victoria replied. Protect our family. Emma nodded slowly, but Victoria could see the hurt in her eyes. They had worked so hard to build a life where they didn't have to hide, where they could be open about their love and their family. The thought of retreating back into secrecy felt like admitting defeat. Over the next few days, the situation escalated rapidly. Despite Victoria's best efforts to contain the story, it exploded across social media and gossip websites. Headlines screamed about Chicago's Ice Queen's secret romance and the nanny who melted a billionaire's heart. The photographs were everywhere, analyzed and dissected by strangers who felt entitled to judge their private lives. Victoria's phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, business associates, and society figures all wanting statements or explanations. The Sterling Industries stock price dropped 3 points in 2 days as investors worried about the company's stability and leadership. Emma bore the brunt of the personal attacks. Comment sections filled with cruel speculation about her motives, her background, her worthiness to be with someone like Victoria Sterling. Strangers called her a gold digger, a social climber, a corrupting influence on a successful woman. The worst comments focused on Michael, questioning whether Emma was a suitable caretaker for a child, whether her presence in his life was harmful or inappropriate. The stress began to take its toll on their relationship. Victoria worked longer hours, trying to manage the crisis and reassure nervous clients and investors. Emma withdrew into herself, spending more time studying and less time engaging in the easy conversations they had once enjoyed. Michael, sensitive to the tension around him, became fussy and clingy, crying when either of them left his sight. The breaking point came during a board meeting at Sterling Industries. Victoria had called the meeting to address the concerns that had been raised about her leadership and to reassure the board that her personal life would not interfere with her professional responsibilities. The conference room was filled with 12 of Chicago's most influential business leaders, men and women who had known Victoria for years and had always respected her judgment and capability. But today, their expressions were guarded, skeptical. Victoria, said James Morrison, the board's longest-serving member and a man who had been her father's close friend, we need to discuss the recent media attention surrounding your personal life and how it might affect the company. Victoria straightened in her chair, calling upon all the confidence and authority she had built over years of leading this company. I understand your concerns, but I want to assure you that my personal relationships have no bearing on my ability to run Sterling Industries effectively. Our quarterly numbers are strong, our projects are on schedule, and our client satisfaction ratings are at an all-time high. It's not about your capability, said Patricia Wong, a sharp-eyed woman who ran one of the city's largest investment firms. It's about perception. Our clients are conservative people who value traditional family structures. This scandal could cost us contracts, damage our reputation. What scandal? Victoria asked, her voice remaining calm despite the anger building in her chest. I'm in a committed relationship with someone who loves me and my son. That's not scandalous, that's normal human happiness. It's not normal for someone in your position, said Robert Fisher, a man who had always been critical of Victoria's leadership style. You're a public figure, the face of this company. Your choices reflect on all of us. Victoria felt the familiar sensation of being cornered, judged, and found wanting by people who claimed to care about her best interests. It was the same feeling she had experienced with James Morrison during her pregnancy, the same feeling she had grown up with under her mother's critical gaze. Are you suggesting I end my relationship? Victoria asked quietly. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, James Morrison spoke. We're suggesting you consider what's best for the company. Maybe this relationship doesn't have to be so public. Maybe you could be more discreet about your personal life. More discreet, Victoria repeated, tasting the bitter irony of the phrase. You want me to hide the woman I love, to pretend that the person who helped me become a better mother and a happier person doesn't exist. We want you to be realistic, Patricia said firmly. This is a business, not a romance novel. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect what we've built. Victoria looked around the room at these people she had considered allies, colleagues, even friends. She saw fear in their eyes, fear of change, fear of anything that challenged their comfortable assumptions about how the world should work. I need time to consider your concerns, Victoria said finally. I'll have an answer for you by the end of the week. That evening, Victoria came home to find Emma packing a suitcase in the guest bedroom. Michael was napping in his crib, exhausted from a day of sensing the adult's stress and anxiety. What are you doing? Victoria asked, though the answer was obvious. Emma didn't look up from folding her clothes. I'm making it easier for you to choose. Choose what? Emma finally met her eyes, and Victoria saw tears streaming down her face. Choose between me and everything else. Between our relationship and your company, your reputation, your mother's approval. I'm taking the choice away so you don't have to make it. Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. Emma, no, don't do this. We can figure this out together. How? Emma asked, her voice breaking. How do we figure out a world that doesn't want us to exist? Every day there are new articles calling me names, questioning my motives, saying I'm harming Michael by being in his life. Your board wants you to hide me. Your mother refuses to speak to you. And your company's stock is dropping because investors think you're too distracted by love to do your job properly. Victoria reached for Emma, but she stepped back, creating distance between them. I love you, Emma continued, and I love Michael more than I ever thought possible. But I won't be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. I won't be the reason Michael grows up hearing terrible things about his family. You're not the reason for any of this, Victoria said desperately. You're the best thing that ever happened to us. The people saying these things are wrong. They're cruel. They don't understand what we have. It doesn't matter if they're wrong, Emma replied sadly. What matters is that they have the power to hurt you, to hurt us, to hurt Michael. And as long as I'm here, they'll keep using me as a weapon against you. Victoria felt her world crumbling around her. Where will you go? Back to my apartment. I'll finish my degree, find another job. Maybe work with families who actually need help instead of families that can afford to hire anyone they want. The words stung because Victoria heard the implication. That she didn't really need Emma, that their relationship was a luxury rather than a necessity. Michael needs you, Victoria said quietly. I need you. Emma's resolve wavered for a moment, and Victoria saw the pain and longing in her eyes. Michael will be fine. He's strong and loved and secure. He'll adapt, and you're the strongest person I know. You'll find a way to be happy without me. I don't want to be happy without you, Victoria said, tears now flowing freely down her own face. I want to fight for us. I want to tell the whole world that I love you, and I don't care what they think about it. Emma smiled sadly. I know you do. But sometimes love means protecting the person you care about, even from yourself. Emma finished packing and kissed Victoria goodbye with a tenderness that felt like both a promise and a farewell. She went to Michael's room and stood over his crib for a long time, whispering words Victoria couldn't hear. Then she left, taking with her the warmth and joy that had transformed Victoria's sterile penthouse into a home. Victoria spent the next 3 days in a haze of grief and anger. Michael cried constantly, looking for Emma in every room, asking for her in his limited vocabulary. Victoria tried to comfort him, but her own heartbreak made it difficult to provide the stability and reassurance he needed. The media attention continued to intensify. Reporters camped outside the building, photographers followed Victoria's car, and speculation about the relationship's status dominated entertainment news. When no one could locate Emma for comment, rumors began that Victoria had disposed of her inconvenient girlfriend to protect her business interests. The cruelty of the coverage finally pushed Victoria over the edge. On Thursday evening, she called Margaret and instructed her to arrange a press conference for the following morning. A press conference? Margaret asked nervously. Are you sure that's wise? The lawyers think it's better to wait for the attention to die down naturally. The lawyers are wrong, Victoria said firmly. I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to let people tell lies about the woman I love or suggest that our relationship was something shameful or temporary. What are you going to say? Victoria looked out the window at the city lights, thinking about Emma somewhere. Out there in her small apartment, probably studying or crying or trying to convince herself she had made the right choice. I'm going to tell the truth, Victoria said. All of it. The press conference was held in the lobby of Sterling Industries, with dozens of reporters and camera crews packed into the space. Victoria had dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that projected authority and confidence, but her hands shook slightly as she approached the podium. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice clear and strong despite her nerves. I've called this press conference to address the recent speculation about my personal life and to set the record straight about my relationship with Emma Rodriguez. The room fell silent, every reporter hanging on her words. For the past 10 months, Emma has been caring for my son Michael, and for the past 6 months, she has been the most important person in my life. She is intelligent, compassionate, dedicated, and she loves my son as if he were her own. Our relationship began as a professional one, but it evolved into something deeper because Emma saw past my public persona to the person underneath. She made me a better mother and a happier human being. Victoria paused, gathering her courage for what came next. Emma did not pursue me for my money or my status. In fact, she has consistently refused my offers to pay for her education or support her financially beyond her salary. She left our home 3 days ago not because she stopped loving us, but because she was trying to protect us from the cruelty and judgment of people who believe that love should be conditional on social approval. A reporter raised her hand. Ms. Sterling, are you saying that your relationship with Ms. Rodriguez is over? Victoria felt tears building behind her eyes, but forced herself to continue. "I'm saying that Emma Rodriguez is the love of my life. And if she have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving to her that our love is stronger than anyone else's prejudice." "What about the concerns raised by your board of directors?" another reporter called out. "Are you willing to risk your company for this relationship?" Victoria smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Sterling Industries has succeeded because of strong leadership, innovative projects, and excellent client service. Those qualities don't change based on who I'm in love with. If the board or our clients can't see that, then perhaps they're not the right partners for us moving forward. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, but Victoria felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since the crisis began. She had told her truth, publicly and completely. She had defended Emma's character and their relationship. Whatever happened next, she would face it honestly. The response to the press conference was immediate and divided. Social media exploded with both support and criticism. Some praised Victoria's courage and authenticity, while others condemned her for putting personal desires above professional responsibilities. Several major clients called to express their continued confidence in Sterling Industries, while a few others hinted at reconsidering their contracts. But the response that mattered most came that evening when Emma appeared at Victoria's door, tears streaming down her face. "I saw the press conference," Emma said. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to risk everything for me." Victoria pulled her into her arms, holding her tightly. "I didn't risk everything for you. I chose everything for you. For us. For the family we've built together." Michael, who had been listless and unhappy for days, came crawling over at top speed when he heard Emma's voice. He pulled himself up on her legs, babbling excitedly and reaching for her to pick him up. Emma scooped him up, covering his face with kisses as he giggled with delight. "I missed you so much," Emma whispered to him. "I'm sorry I left." "I won't do that again, promise?" Victoria asked, and Emma knew she wasn't just talking about Michael. "Promise," Emma said, reaching for Victoria's hand. "We'll face whatever comes next together." The weeks that followed were challenging, but ultimately triumphant. Some clients did leave Sterling Industries, and a few board members resigned. But they were replaced by others who valued Victoria's honesty and leadership style. The company's stock price recovered as investors realized that the personal attacks hadn't affected Victoria's business acumen or the company's fundamental strength. More importantly, the crisis had clarified something essential for Victoria. She was no longer willing to compartmentalize her life, to pretend that her personal happiness was separate from her professional success. Emma and Michael weren't distractions from her work. They were the foundation that made everything else possible. Emma moved back into the penthouse permanently, and they began making plans for a future that didn't require hiding or compromise. Victoria had learned that authenticity was more powerful than approval, that love really could conquer prejudice if you were willing to fight for it. The family that had been forged in crisis was now stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with the confidence that comes from having survived the worst and emerged intact. Victoria had chosen love over fear, truth over convenience, and in doing so, she had discovered that the things she thought she might lose were nothing compared to what she had gained. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Sterling Industries' newest conference room, illuminating the faces of Chicago's most prominent business leaders gathered around the polished oak table. Victoria Sterling stood at the head of the room, radiating confidence as she presented the final details of what would become the largest sustainable housing development project in the Midwest. Phase 3 of the Riverside Green Community will break ground this fall, Victoria announced, clicking to the next slide of her presentation. With over 800 units designed to be both affordable and environmentally responsible, this project represents everything Sterling Industries stands for: innovation, sustainability, and community building. The assembled investors and city officials nodded approvingly. The Riverside Green project had been Victoria's passion for the past 18 months, combining her business acumen with her growing commitment to social responsibility. It was the kind of project that would have been impossible during the turbulent period following her public relationship announcement, but the company had emerged stronger and more focused than ever. Margaret, now promoted to senior vice president, stood near the presentation screen, managing the technical aspects with the same efficiency she had brought to her previous role as Victoria's assistant. She had been instrumental in rebuilding the company's client base after the exodus that followed Victoria's press conference, helping to attract new investors who valued authenticity and progressive leadership. The environmental impact studies show a 40% reduction in carbon footprint compared to traditional developments, Victoria continued, and the community spaces are designed to foster connection and support among residents. This isn't just housing, it's home building. As the presentation concluded and the investors began filing out with promises to finalize their commitments within the week, Victoria felt a familiar sense of satisfaction. But it was different now from the pure ambition that had once driven her. Success still mattered, but it was tempered by a deeper understanding of what made achievement meaningful. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Michael just said Mama Vic and Mama M in the same sentence for the first time. I think he's figured out the family structure. P.S. Dinner will be ready when you get home. Victoria smiled, her heart warming at the image of her son confidently claiming both his mothers. At nearly 3 years old, Michael had no memory of the turmoil that had once threatened to tear their family apart. To him, having 2 mothers who loved him was simply the natural order of the world. The drive home took Victoria through the heart of Chicago, past the gleaming towers and bustling streets that had once represented the entirety of her universe. She still loved the city, still thrived on the energy and opportunity it provided, but her perspective had fundamentally shifted. The penthouse was no longer just a place she slept between business obligations. It was the center of a life she had consciously chosen to build. When Victoria opened the front door, she was greeted by the sound of Michael's laughter echoing from the kitchen. She found him standing on a small stool beside the counter, carefully stirring something in a large bowl while Emma guided his hands. We're making cookies for dessert, Emma announced, flour dusting her cheek and apron. Michael insisted on helping with every single step. I'm a good helper, Michael declared seriously, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he concentrated on his stirring technique. Mama M says I'm the best mixer in the whole kitchen. Victoria kissed Emma hello, tasting sugar and vanilla on her lips, then lifted Michael for a hug that left flower handprints on her business suit. She no longer minded when work and home life intersected in such obvious ways. The rigid boundaries she had once maintained seemed not just unnecessary but counterproductive. How did the presentation go? Emma asked, returning to her supervision of Michael's cookie preparation. Better than expected, Victoria replied, loosening her jacket and rolling up her sleeves to join the baking project. We should have full funding approval by next week. The investors were particularly interested in the community garden spaces and the on-site childcare facility. Emma's eyes lit up. The childcare facility was your idea, wasn't it? Victoria nodded, feeling proud of the innovation. I kept thinking about working parents who struggle to find quality care for their children. If we can provide that as part of the housing community, we're solving multiple problems at once. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had transformed Sterling Industries over the past 2 years. Victoria's experience as a working mother had given her insights into the challenges faced by families across all economic levels. The company's projects now consistently included features that supported family life and community connection, setting them apart from competitors who focus solely on profit margins. Michael, having grown bored with stirring, climbed down from his stool and ran to retrieve his favorite book from the living room. "Story time," he announced, returning with a well-worn copy of The Little Engine That Could. "After dinner, sweetheart," Emma said gently. "But you can help Mama Vic set the table if you want." Victoria marveled at how naturally Emma had assumed the role of Michael's second mother. There had been no formal adoption proceedings, no legal documentation of their family structure, but Emma's place in Michael's life was unquestionable. She handled discipline with the same gentle firmness Victoria tried to maintain, celebrated his achievements with genuine pride, and worried about his well-being with the intensity of any biological parent. The evening routine unfolded with the comfortable rhythm they had established over years of practice. Dinner conversation included Michael's detailed account of his morning at preschool, Emma's update on her graduate school applications, and Victoria's excitement about the upcoming groundbreaking ceremony for the Riverside Green Project. "I've been thinking," Emma said as they cleared the dishes, "about the community outreach position you mentioned last month. The one focused on family services for the housing developments." Victoria paused in loading the dishwasher. "Are you interested in applying?" "Maybe," Emma said carefully. "I know it would mean working together officially, which could be complicated. But it seems like a perfect fit for my background in social work and my understanding of what families actually need." Victoria considered this development with mixed emotions. Working together could certainly create challenges, but Emma's insights and expertise would be invaluable for the company's community-focused initiatives. More importantly, it would mean Emma could build a career that utilized her education and passion while remaining connected to the Sterling Industries family. "We'd have to establish clear professional boundaries," Victoria said thoughtfully. "Different departments, separate reporting structures, but I think you'd be brilliant at it." Michael, who had been half listening to their conversation while building a tower with his blocks, suddenly looked up with interest. "Mama M would work at Mama Vic's building?" "Maybe, little one," Emma said, smoothing his hair. "Would you like that?" Michael nodded enthusiastically. "Then you could both take me to work sometimes." Victoria and Emma exchanged amused glances. Michael's logic was unassailable. If both his mothers worked at the same workplace, visits would become much more convenient. That night, after Michael was asleep and they had settled into their evening routine of reading and quiet conversation, Victoria reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. The woman who had once worked 16-hour days and measured success purely in financial terms now left the office promptly at 5:30 each evening, attended every preschool performance and pediatric appointment, and found her greatest satisfaction in moments exactly like this one. "Do you ever miss it?" Emma asked, as if reading her thoughts. "The way your life used to be? The simplicity of only having to worry about yourself and your career?" Victoria considered the question seriously. "I miss the certainty sometimes," she admitted. "When it was just me, I always knew exactly what I wanted and how to get it. Now there are so many variables, so many people whose happiness matters to me." "But do you miss the actual life you had?" "Never," Victoria said without hesitation. "That life was successful, but it wasn't fulfilling. I was achieving things, but I wasn't experiencing them. I had everything I thought I wanted, but nothing I actually needed." Emma curled closer to Victoria on the sofa, her head resting on Victoria's shoulder. "I never imagined my life could be like this," she confessed. "Growing up, love always seemed like something that happened to other people with more money or education or luck. I thought I'd spend my life helping other families, while never quite having one of my own." Victoria kissed the top of Emma's head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "You didn't just get a family," she said softly. "You created one. You took a broken woman and a crying baby and somehow made us whole." The next morning brought news that would test their hard-won stability once again. Victoria was reviewing quarterly reports when Margaret knocked on her office door, with an expression Victoria had learned to recognize as bearing significant information. "Victoria," Margaret said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I've received an interesting call from Eleanor Sterling's office. Your mother wants to schedule a meeting." Victoria felt her stomach tighten. She and her mother had maintained minimal contact since their confrontation 2 years earlier. They exchanged perfunctory holiday cards and brief phone calls on birthdays, but the warmth and closeness they had once shared remained absent. Eleanor had never met Michael in person, despite being his only living grandmother, and she had never acknowledged Emma's existence beyond that initial, disastrous encounter. "Did she say what she wants to discuss?" Victoria asked. "She was quite formal about it," Margaret replied. "She mentioned wanting to discuss family matters and suggested meeting at her home rather than the office." Victoria's first instinct was to decline the meeting. The wounds from their last serious conversation still felt raw, and she was protective of the peace her family had found. But another part of her missed her mother, missed the guidance and support Eleanor had provided during Victoria's early career years. "Schedule it for this weekend," Victoria decided. "Saturday afternoon, after Michael's nap." That evening, Victoria discussed the upcoming meeting with Emma, who listened thoughtfully while helping Michael build an elaborate train track across their living room floor. "Are you nervous?" Emma asked. "Terrified," Victoria admitted. "I don't know what she wants, but I'm not willing to compromise on our family structure to appease her." Emma reached across the train tracks to squeeze Victoria's hand. "Whatever she says, whatever she wants, we'll handle it together. Our family is strong enough to withstand outside pressure now." Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, matching Victoria's apprehensive mood. She had chosen her outfit carefully. Professional but not intimidating, confident but not defiant. Emma had offered to accompany her, but Victoria felt this was a conversation she needed to have alone. Eleanor Sterling's lakefront mansion looked exactly as Victoria remembered from her childhood, imposing, perfectly maintained, and slightly intimidating. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, greeted Victoria warmly and led her to the same formal sitting room, where she had received countless lectures about proper behavior and social expectations. Eleanor entered the room with the same regal bearing that had made her such a formidable presence in Chicago society for decades. At 72, she remained striking, her silver hair perfectly styled and her navy dress impeccably tailored. But Victoria noticed new lines around her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands that spoke of age and perhaps uncertainty. "Victoria," Eleanor said, extending her cheek for the traditional air kiss that had always marked their formal interactions. "Thank you for coming." They settled into the antique chairs that faced each other across a coffee table laden with delicate china and Eleanor's famous lemon cookies. For several minutes, they exchanged polite inquiries about health and weather, carefully avoiding any mention of the rift between them. Finally, Eleanor set down her teacup and fixed Victoria with the direct gaze that had always demanded honesty. "I asked you here because I owe you an apology," she said, her voice quieter than Victoria had ever heard it. "And because I've realized that my pride has cost me precious time with my grandson." Victoria felt her carefully maintained composure. "Waver, mother, please let me finish," Eleanor interrupted gently. "I've spent the last 2 years convincing myself that I was protecting you, protecting the family reputation, protecting everything your father worked to build. But I've come to understand that I was really protecting my own narrow view of how the world should work." Eleanor reached for a manila folder that had been sitting beside her chair. "I've been following your career, your company's projects, your public appearances. I've seen how happy you look, how confident and purposeful you've become. And I've seen how that young woman, Emma, looks at you and at Michael." Victoria's heart began to race as Eleanor opened the folder to reveal newspaper clippings, magazine articles, and photographs spanning the past 2 years. Pictures of Victoria at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, Emma at community service events, Michael at various family outings. I hired a private investigator, Eleanor admitted, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Not to hurt you, but to understand what I had lost, what I had thrown away with my prejudice and stubbornness. Victoria stared at the collection of images, seeing her family's life documented by a stranger's lens. Mother, why are you telling me this? Eleanor's composure finally cracked, tears sliding down her perfectly powdered cheeks. Because I want to meet my grandson properly. Because I want to apologize to Emma for the horrible things I said about her. Because I want to be part of your family again, if you'll let me. The words Victoria had longed to hear for 2 years suddenly felt overwhelming. What changed your mind? Last week, I was at the Drake Hotel for the Children's Hospital fundraiser, Eleanor said, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Emma was there with several other social workers, organizing donations for homeless families. I watched her interact with those children, saw how gentle and patient she was, how much joy she brought to a difficult situation. And I realized that any woman who could inspire that kind of love and trust in children was exactly the kind of person I would want caring for my grandson. Victoria felt her own tears beginning to fall. She's an amazing mother to Michael. He adores her. I can see that, Eleanor said, pointing to one of the photographs showing Emma and Michael at a playground, both laughing as he went down a slide. And I can see how much she loves you. The way she looks at you in these pictures, it's the same way your father used to look at me. The comparison to her beloved father hit Victoria like a physical blow. Eleanor had rarely spoken about the depth of her marriage since his death, but Victoria knew her parents had shared something rare and precious. I don't need you to forgive me immediately, Eleanor continued. I know I've caused tremendous pain with my selfishness and judgment, but I'm hoping you might allow me to earn my way back into your lives, to be the grandmother Michael deserves and the mother you need. Victoria looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw not the intimidating society matriarch, but a lonely woman who had realized she had sacrificed love for pride. The anger Victoria had carried for 2 years began to dissolve, replaced by something that felt like hope. Michael asks about you sometimes, Victoria said softly. Emma showed him pictures and told him about his grandmother who lives in the big house by the lake. He wants to meet you. Eleanor's face lit up with a joy that transformed her entirely. Really? He knows about me? Emma insisted, Victoria explained. She said every child should know their family history, even the complicated parts. She's been preparing him for the possibility that someday we might all be together. That young woman is wiser than I gave her credit for, Eleanor said with obvious regret. Much wiser than I've been. They talked for another hour, carefully, rebuilding the bridge that had been burned 2 years earlier. Eleanor shared her regret about missing Michael's first steps, his first words, his second birthday party. Victoria described the joy and challenges of raising a toddler, the way parenthood had changed her perspective on everything from business to relationships. When Victoria finally prepared to leave, Eleanor walked her to the door with an urgency that spoke of years of missed opportunities. Would you consider bringing Michael and Emma for dinner next Sunday? Eleanor asked hopefully. Nothing formal, just family dinner. I'd like to start over with all of you. Victoria smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. I'll ask Emma, but I think she'd like that. She believes in second chances. Smart woman, Eleanor said, embracing Victoria with more warmth than she had shown in years. Your father would have loved her, you know. He always said the measure of a person wasn't their background, but their character. The drive home gave Victoria time to process the emotional conversation and consider how to share the news with Emma and Michael. She found them in the kitchen, Emma helping Michael decorate sugar cookies with colorful icing while music played softly in the background. How did it go? Emma asked, reading Victoria's expression carefully. Better than I ever hoped, Victoria replied, lifting Michael for a hug before settling beside Emma at the kitchen island. She wants to meet you properly, and she wants to be part of Michael's life." Emma's face showed a mixture of surprise and cautious optimism. "What do you think? Do you trust her?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "I think she's genuinely changed. She seemed honestly regretful about the time she's lost with Michael, and she spoke about you with real respect. She wants to have dinner with all of us next Sunday." "Grandmama dinner," Michael announced, apparently understanding more of the conversation than the adults had realized. "Can I bring my cookies?" Emma and Victoria exchanged amused glances. Michael's enthusiasm for meeting his grandmother was infectious, and his simple acceptance of expanding their family circle reminded them both of why children were often wiser than adults about love and forgiveness. "We can bring cookies," Emma assured him, then turned to Victoria. "I'd like to meet her. For Michael's sake and for yours. Family is important, even when it's complicated." Sunday dinner at Eleanor Sterling's mansion was a revelation for everyone involved. Eleanor had clearly prepared extensively, researching Michael's favorite foods and interests, setting up a play area in the formal dining room, and instructing Mrs. Chun to prepare a child-friendly menu alongside the more sophisticated dishes. Michael was initially shy, clinging to Emma's hand as they entered the imposing house, but Eleanor's genuine delight in meeting him quickly won him over. She had purchased age-appropriate toys and books, and she listened with rapt attention as he told her about his train collection and his favorite bedtime stories. Emma, meanwhile, navigated the formal environment with the same grace she brought to every challenging situation. She complimented Eleanor's beautiful home, asked thoughtful questions about the family photographs lining the hallways, and shared stories about Michael's development that clearly moved his grandmother to tears. "He's so much like Victoria was." At that age, Eleanor observed as they watched Michael carefully arrange his toy cars in a precise line across the Persian rug. Thoughtful and determined, but with such a sweet nature. "He gets the sweetness from Emma," Victoria said, squeezing Emma's hand under the table. "She's taught him that kindness is just as important as intelligence." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Your father always said that character matters more than credentials. I lost sight of that wisdom for a while, but I'm grateful to be reminded of it now." As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed more naturally. Eleanor shared stories from Victoria's childhood. Emma talked about her work with families in crisis, and Michael provided running commentary on everything from the taste of his dinner to the interesting shadows cast by the chandelier. When it came time to leave, Michael hugged his grandmother goodbye without any prompting, promising to visit again soon and show her his favorite books. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she watched Emma help Michael into his car seat with the practiced efficiency of a devoted parent. "Thank you," Eleanor said to Emma as they prepared to leave. "Thank you for taking such beautiful care of my family. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what a gift you are to all of us." Emma's response was characteristically gracious. "Thank you for welcoming me into your home. Michael needs to know his grandmother, and I think we all benefit from having more people to love." The drive home was filled with Michael's excited chatter about his grandmother's house, her cookies, and her promise to take him to the zoo the following weekend. In the rearview mirror, Victoria caught Emma's eye and saw the same contentment. She felt herself. Their family circle had expanded once again, healed by time and wisdom and the irresistible force of a 3-year-old's unconditional love. The challenges that had once seemed insurmountable, social disapproval, professional pressure, family rejection, had been overcome not through compromise or surrender, but through the patient insistence that love was stronger than fear. As they pulled into their building's parking garage, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 years earlier, she had been a successful but isolated woman, measuring her worth entirely through professional achievements. Now she was part of something larger and more meaningful, a family built on choice rather than obligation. strengthened by adversity and sustained by the daily commitment to put love first. Michael fell asleep in the elevator, exhausted by the excitement of meeting his grandmother. Emma carried him to his room while Victoria followed, both of them moving with the quiet efficiency of parents who had performed this routine countless times. As they tucked Michael into his bed, he mumbled sleepily, "I like Grandmama. She smells like flowers and cookies." "She likes you too, sweetheart," Emma whispered, kissing his forehead. "Sweet dreams." Later, as Victoria and Emma prepared for bed themselves, they reflected on how much their lives had changed and how much they had grown. The woman who had once been afraid to need anyone and the young woman who had never believed she deserved everything good now shared a life that neither had dared to imagine. "Do you think this is what happiness actually looks like?" Emma asked as they settled into bed, Victoria's arm wrapped around her shoulders. "I think happiness looks different for everyone," Victoria replied. "But for us, for right now, this feels perfect." Outside their bedroom windows, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of ambition and possibility and dreams yet to be fulfilled. But inside their home, three people who had found each other against all odds slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that love really could create miracles when people were brave enough to choose it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.